The massive cruise ship towered above Jessica Parker like a floating city made of steel and dreams. She stood on the dock in Miami, clutching her single suitcase with white knuckles, watching other passengers board with the confidence of seasoned travelers. 28 years old, and she had never set foot on anything larger than a ferry. The idea terrified her. "Come on, Jess. It's going to be amazing." Her best friend Amanda had said 3 months ago while booking this 7-day Caribbean cruise as a birthday surprise. "You work too hard. You need to get out there and live a little." Living a little apparently meant stepping aboard a vessel that could house a small town and trusting it to carry her across hundreds of miles of open ocean. Jessica's stomach churned as she watched the endless stream of passengers disappearing through the ship's entrance. Families with excited children, couples holding hands, groups of friends already laughing and taking selfies. Everyone seemed to belong here except her. The boarding process moved faster than she expected. Before she knew it, Jessica found herself inside the ship's grand atrium, a soaring space with marble floors and crystal chandeliers that sparkled like captured stars. The sound of her heels clicked nervously against the polished surface as she tried to navigate through the crowd with her luggage. "Welcome aboard the Ocean Majesty," announced a cheerful crew member with a bright smile and crisp white uniform. "The welcome party begins in the Sunset Lounge at 6 o'clock. Don't forget to try our famous tropical punch." Jessica nodded politely. But the idea of a party filled with strangers made her palms sweat. She had always been more comfortable in small groups, preferring quiet coffee shops to crowded bars, intimate dinners to large celebrations. Her job as a marketing executive required her to be social. But that was work. This was supposed to be vacation. She had no idea how to relax around people she didn't know. Finding her cabin took longer than expected. The ship's layout resembled a maze of corridors and elevators, all decorated in the same elegant blue and gold theme. By the time she located room 4127, Jessica felt even more overwhelmed. The cabin was small but luxurious, with a tiny balcony overlooking the ocean. She sat on the bed and stared out at the endless water. Already feeling homesick for her familiar Chicago apartment, the ship's horn blasted 3 times. Signaling their departure from port, Jessica watched Miami's skyline grow smaller through her window. The solid ground she had known all her life disappearing into the distance. Her hands began to shake slightly as the reality hit her. She was truly alone on this floating city, surrounded by strangers. With nowhere to run if things went wrong by 5:30, Jessica had changed clothes 3 times, trying to find something appropriate for the welcome party. She finally settled on a navy blue sundress that made her feel slightly more confident. The mirror reflected a woman with shoulder-length brown hair, nervous green eyes, and a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She practiced introducing herself to imaginary strangers, but each attempt sounded more awkward than the last. The Sunset Lounge occupied most of the ship's 7th deck, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the darkening ocean. The space buzzed with conversation and laughter as passengers mingled with drinks in hand. A live band played soft jazz in one corner while servers circulated with trays of appetizers that looked more like art than food. Jessica hovered near the entrance, watching the social dance unfold before her. Groups formed and reformed with the fluid ease of people accustomed to meeting strangers. She observed couples celebrating anniversaries, families planning their shore excursions, and solo travelers who seemed perfectly comfortable striking up conversations with anyone nearby. Taking a deep breath, Jessica approached the bar and ordered a virgin mojito, hoping the mint would calm her nerves. The bartender, a friendly man named Carlos, chatted easily as he prepared her drink, asking about her hometown and whether this was her first cruise. His genuine interest made her feel slightly more at ease. "First time, huh?" Carlos smiled as he garnished her mojito with fresh mint. "Don't worry, everyone's nervous their first time. By tomorrow, you'll feel like you've been sailing all your life." Jessica thanked him and found a quiet spot near the windows where she could observe without feeling pressured to join conversations. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, painted in shades of purple and gold by the setting sun. Despite her anxiety, She had to admit the view was breathtaking. The ship suddenly lurched to one side, movement more pronounced than the gentle swaying she had grown accustomed to during the past hour. Several passengers laughed and steadied themselves, clearly familiar with the ocean's unpredictable nature. But Jessica, caught off guard while reaching for a nearby table, lost her balance completely. Her mojito flew from her hand as she stumbled sideways, arms windmilling desperately as she tried to regain her footing. In her panic, she grabbed onto the first solid thing she could find, which happened to be the arm of a man standing nearby. But her momentum was too strong, and instead of catching herself, she crashed directly into his chest, sending them both stumbling backward. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," Jessica gasped, her face burning with embarrassment as she realized she was pressed against a stranger's white button-down shirt, her hands clutching his jacket lapels like a drowning person clinging to a life preserver. The man steadied both of them with surprising grace, his hands gently gripping her shoulders until she regained her balance. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm and concerned rather than annoyed. That was quite a wave. Jessica looked up into kind brown eyes set in a face that belonged in a business magazine. The man appeared to be in his mid-30s, dark hair slightly messed by their collision and a jawline that suggested he spent time outdoors despite his obvious wealth. His clothes were expensive but understated. It's a kind of casual elegance that costs more than most people's monthly salary. "I'm fine," Jessica stammered, stepping back and smoothing down her dress. I think I'm fine. I'm not used to ships moving like that. Actually, I'm not used to ships at all. This is my first cruise, and I'm probably doing everything wrong, and I just grabbed you like some kind of crazy person." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You're not doing anything wrong. The ocean can be unpredictable, especially for newcomers. I'm Nathan Sterling." He extended his hand in a formal gesture that seemed charmingly old-fashioned. "Jessica Parker," she replied, shaking his hand and noticing how warm and steady his grip felt. "And I promise I don't usually throw myself at strangers, just when large boats start moving unexpectedly." "Large boats," Nathan repeated with amusement. "I think the Ocean Majesty might be slightly larger than a boat, but I appreciate your modesty." Jessica felt her cheeks redden further. "See, I told you I was doing everything wrong. I don't know the difference between a boat and a ship. I can't walk in a straight line when there are waves. And I just spilled mojito all over your probably very expensive shirt." Nathan glanced down at the small wet spots on his shirt and shrugged. "It's just a shirt, and mint is actually quite refreshing. Besides, you provided the most interesting introduction I've had at one of these parties in years." Something in his tone caught Jessica's attention. Despite his expensive clothes and confident demeanor, there was a wariness in his eyes that seemed familiar. "You don't enjoy these parties either?" "Let's just say I'm more comfortable in conference rooms than cocktail lounges," Nathan admitted, glancing around at the mingling crowd. "But my assistant insists that taking actual vacations is essential for maintaining what she calls my emotional intelligence quotient." Jessica laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her. "Your assistant sounds like my best friend. She booked this cruise and told me I needed to get out and live a little. Apparently, working 60-hour weeks isn't considered a full life." 60 hours? Nathan raised an eyebrow. "That's practically part-time in my world. What do you do?" Jessica asked, then immediately felt presumptuous. "Sorry, I don't mean to pry. It's just that you seem like someone who's used to being in charge. I develop mobile applications. Started with a simple productivity app in my garage 7 years ago, and somehow it turned into a company with 400 employees, and offices in 12 cities." Nathan's voice carried a mix of pride and exhaustion. "These days, I spend more time in boardrooms than actually creating anything." Jessica studied his face, noting the tension around his eyes despite his relaxed posture. "Do you miss it? The creating part?" The question seemed to catch Nathan off guard. He was quiet for a moment, watching the last traces of sunlight disappear into the ocean. No one's asked me that in years. Everyone wants to know about market share and expansion plans and investor relations. But do I miss the actual work that made me fall in love with technology in the first place?" He paused. "Every single day." I understand that feeling, Jessica said softly. I got into marketing because I loved the creative side, finding new ways to tell stories that connect with people. Now I spend most of my time analyzing data and optimizing conversion rates. Important work, but not exactly what I dreamed about when I was studying communications. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two strangers who had found an unexpected connection through their shared sense of having lost touch with their original passions. The ship continued its gentle rocking motion, but Jessica noticed she no longer felt unsteady. Perhaps having someone to talk to made everything seem less overwhelming? "Can I buy you another mojito?" Nathan asked, gesturing toward the bar where Carlos was expertly mixing drinks for a group of celebrating passengers. "I promise to provide better conversation than whatever networking opportunities are lurking around this lounge." Jessica glanced around the room, taking in the clusters of people who all seemed to know exactly how to cruise properly. The thought of trying to insert herself into their conversation still felt daunting. But talking with Nathan felt surprisingly natural. "You know what? I'd like that very much." As they walked toward the bar together, Jessica realized that her panic attack and embarrassing collision might have been exactly what she needed. Sometimes the best connections came from the most unexpected moments. And maybe this cruise would teach her something about taking chances after all. The evening had started with fear and embarrassment, but it was ending with the possibility of friendship. And for the first time since boarding the Ocean Majesty, Jessica felt like she might actually enjoy this adventure on the high seas. The next morning brought crystal clear skies and calm seas that sparkled like scattered diamonds under the Caribbean sun. Jessica woke feeling more rested than she had in months. Though she wasn't sure if it was the gentle rocking of the ship or the memory of her unexpected conversation with Nathan that had helped her sleep so peacefully. She had planned to spend the day exploring the ship alone, maybe finding a quiet corner to read the novel she had packed, but never seemed to have time for back home. But as she made her way to the breakfast buffet on Deck 9, she spotted a familiar figure sitting alone at a corner table, laptop open despite the vacation setting. Nathan looked up as she approached, his face brightening with genuine pleasure. "Good morning, Jessica. I was hoping I might run into you today." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Care to join me for breakfast? I promise the ship is much steadier this morning." Jessica smiled, remembering her graceless introduction the night before. "I think I can handle sitting down without causing any accidents." She settled into the chair, noting that Nathan's breakfast consisted of black coffee and what appeared to be a protein bar. "Is that really your idea of vacation food?" Nathan glanced at his meager meal sheepishly. "Old habits. I usually eat at my desk while reviewing overnight reports from our Asian offices. Time differences mean there's always something urgent happening somewhere in the world." "Well, you're in luck," Jessica announced, standing back up with determination. "I'm about to introduce you to the concept of vacation breakfast. Stay right here and try not to check email while I'm gone." She returned 15 minutes later, with 2 plates piled high with fresh fruit, pastries, scrambled eggs, and bacon. "This," she said, setting the feast before Nathan, "is how normal people eat when they're not trying to manage a global empire before 9 in the morning." Nathan stared at the colorful array, his food as if he'd never seen anything like it. "I don't think I've eaten this much food in a single sitting since college. When was the last time you took a real vacation?" Jessica asked, cutting into her eggs. "And I mean a real vacation where you completely disconnect from work." Nathan thought for a long moment. "I took a weekend in Napa Valley about 3 years ago for a friend's wedding. But I spent most of it in the hotel room on conference calls with our development team. That doesn't count," Jessica declared. "A real vacation means no work calls, no emails, no thinking about quarterly projections or whatever it is tech moguls worry about when they're supposed to be relaxing." "And what about you?" Nathan asked, sampling the fresh pineapple with obvious surprise at how good it tasted. "When did you last take a real vacation?" Jessica paused, realizing she was about to expose her own workaholic tendencies. "This is actually my first real vacation in about 4 years. I usually use my time off to catch up on industry conferences or online courses. My friend Amanda practically had to drag me to the travel agency to book this cruise. So we're both vacation amateurs," Nathan observed with amusement. Maybe we can figure it out together. After breakfast. Nathan surprised Jessica by suggesting they explore the ship together. I've been on 3 cruises for business events, he admitted as they walked along the promenade deck. But I've never actually looked around just for the fun of it. Their exploration turned into a 4-hour adventure that revealed hidden corners and unexpected delights throughout the massive vessel. They discovered a quiet library with floor-to-ceiling windows and comfortable reading chairs. They found an art gallery featuring local Caribbean artists, whose work told stories of island life in vibrant colors. They even stumbled upon a small chapel where an elderly couple was renewing their wedding vows with tears of joy streaming down their faces. 50 years. Oh. The bride whispered to Jessica as they passed by, and I still get butterflies when he looks at me like that. The comment stayed with Jessica as they continued their tour. She found herself stealing glances at Nathan, noticing how his usual tension seemed to fade as the morning progressed. His shoulders relaxed, his smile came more easily, and he began asking questions about things that had nothing to do with business or productivity. I haven't noticed details like this in years, Nathan admitted as they stood on the observation deck. Watching dolphins play in the ship's wake, really notice them, not just acknowledge they exist while thinking about something else. I know exactly what you mean, Jessica replied. I spend so much time looking at computer screens that I sometimes forget there's a whole world happening around me. This is the first time in months I've watched an actual sunset, instead of just seeing the time on my phone and realizing the day was over. They decided to have lunch at the ship's casual poolside grill. Settling at a table under an umbrella where they could watch other passengers enjoying the various activities. Families splashed in the pools, couples lounged on deck chairs reading books to each other, and groups of friends played competitive games of shuffleboard. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to be that carefree? Jessica asked, nodding toward a group of college-age passengers who were laughing loudly over some shared joke. Honestly, I can barely remember being that age, Nathan admitted. I started my first company when I was 22, right out of college. I went straight from final exams to investor meetings without ever taking time to just be young and stupid. I did the opposite, Jessica said thoughtfully. I spent my early 20s being young and maybe a little too carefree. Then I got scared that I wasn't serious enough, wasn't ambitious enough. So I threw myself into work so hard that I forgot how to have fun. Now I feel like I skipped some important middle ground. Nathan studied her face with interest. What changed? What made you decide you needed to be more serious? Jessica hesitated, surprised by how personal the question felt and how much she wanted to answer honestly. My father died when I was 25. Heart attack at 52, completely unexpected. He had spent his whole life working toward retirement, saving money, and planning for all the things he would do someday. Someday never came for him. I'm sorry, Nathan said quietly, and his voice carried genuine sympathy rather than the polite condolences she usually received. Thank you. It made me realize how fragile everything is, how quickly life can change. So I decided I needed to build something solid, something secure, a career that would protect me from uncertainty. But somewhere along the way, I think I stopped living in the present because I was so focused on securing the future. Nathan nodded slowly. I understand that fear. My parents lost their house when I was 15 because my father trusted the wrong business partner. Watching them start over from nothing taught me that financial security was the most important thing in the world. I've spent the last 15 years building walls around myself so thick that I sometimes feel like I'm living in a fortress. Lonely fortress. Jessica asked softly. Very lonely, Nathan admitted, but safe. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Jessica felt a strange sense of relief at having shared something so personal with someone who seemed to understand her motivations without judgment. You know what I think? Jessica said finally. I think we both forgot that security and happiness aren't the same thing. You can have all the money and success in the world, but if you're too afraid to actually live your life, what's the point? Wise words from someone who's on her first vacation in 4 years? Nathan teased gently. Hey, I'm learning as I go, Jessica laughed. Besides, sometimes it takes another workaholic to recognize the symptoms. That afternoon, they decided to try one of the ship's organized activities together. Jessica had always avoided group events, finding them either too competitive or too silly for her taste. But Nathan's presence made her feel braver, more willing to step outside her comfort zone. They chose a dance lesson being offered on the main deck, partly because it seemed like something neither of them would normally do. The instructor, an energetic woman named Maria, paired them together and began teaching basic salsa steps to a group of about 20 passengers. "I should warn you," Jessica whispered as Maria demonstrated the footwork, "I have absolutely no rhythm. My college roommate once said I danced like I was trying to stomp out a fire." "Well, I haven't danced since my high school prom," Nathan replied. "And even then, I mostly just swayed back and forth and hoped for the best." Their first attempts were exactly as awkward as expected. Jessica stepped on Nathan's feet twice in the first 5 minutes, and Nathan seemed to be overthinking every movement as if he were debugging computer code. But gradually, with Maria's patient instruction and a lot of laughter at their own mistakes, they began to find a rhythm together. "The secret," Maria announced to the group, "is to stop thinking and start feeling the music. Let your bodies communicate with each other instead of trying to remember all the steps." Jessica found herself relaxing into Nathan's lead, trusting him to guide her movements even when she wasn't sure where her feet should go next. There was something intimate about the way they moved together, a connection that had nothing to do with technical skill and everything to do with learning to trust another person. "You're getting good at this," Nathan murmured as they swayed through a slower sequence, his hand warm against her back. "I think I'm just getting good at following your lead," Jessica replied, surprised by how natural it felt to be held in his arms. When the lesson ended, they were both laughing and slightly breathless. Other passengers complimented their progress, and Jessica realized she felt proud of something that had nothing to do with work, performance, or professional achievement. That was terrifying and wonderful at the same time, she admitted as they walked back toward the ships. "Interior, I know exactly what you mean," Nathan agreed. "When was the last time you did something that scared you just for fun?" Jessica thought about it. "I honestly can't remember. Everything that scares me these days is related to work or paying bills or meeting other people's expectations. I had forgotten that fear could be exciting instead of just stressful." As evening approached, they found themselves reluctant to part ways. The day had created an easy intimacy between them, built on shared confessions and new experiences. They decided to have dinner together at one of the ship's specialty restaurants, continuing their conversation over plates of perfectly prepared seafood and glasses of wine that made Jessica feel pleasantly relaxed. "Can I ask you something personal?" Nathan said as they shared a dessert that was almost too beautiful to eat. "After today, I think we're past the point of polite small talk. Do you think it's possible for people like us to change? To find a balance between being responsible and actually enjoying life?" Jessica considered the question carefully. "I think we're both proof that change is possible. 3 days ago, I would never have signed up for a dance lesson or shared personal stories with a stranger. And you haven't checked your phone once during dinner." Nathan glanced at his pocket with surprise. "You're right. I didn't even notice. Maybe that's the first step," Jessica suggested. "Learning to be present in the moment instead of always thinking about what comes next." As they said goodnight outside Jessica's cabin, both seemed hesitant for the day to end. There was an electricity in the air between them, a sense that something important was beginning to develop. "Thank you for today," Nathan said, his voice soft in the quiet corridor. "I haven't felt this relaxed in years. Thank you for helping me remember that trying new things can be fun instead of terrifying," Jessica replied. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, both aware that something had shifted between them over the course of the day. When Nathan finally said goodnight and headed toward his own cabin, Jessica found herself smiling as she got ready for bed. For the first time since boarding the ship, she was genuinely excited about what tomorrow might bring. Jessica woke on their 5th day at sea with a strange flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the ship's movement. She had spent the past 3 days with Nathan, and each moment together felt more natural than the last. They had shared quiet breakfasts, explored every deck of the massive ship, attended cooking classes where they laughed at their failed attempts to create gourmet meals, and spent hours talking about everything from childhood dreams to future fears. What surprised Jessica most was how easily Nathan had begun to let his guard down. The intense businessman who had carried a laptop to their first meeting now left his phone in his cabin during their adventures together. She watched him discover simple pleasures he had forgotten existed: the taste of fresh tropical fruit, the satisfaction of finishing a good book, the joy of conversation that had no agenda beyond connection. This morning felt different, though. Today was their last full day at sea before the ship returned to Miami, and the approaching end of their time together had created an unspoken tension between them. They had carefully avoided discussing what would happen when they returned to their separate lives in different cities. Jessica found Nathan in their usual spot on the observation deck. But instead of his typical relaxed morning demeanor, he seemed restless. He was gripping the railing and staring out at the horizon where dark clouds were gathering despite the early morning sunshine. "Good morning," she said softly. Not wanting to startle him out of his thoughts, Nathan turned and smiled, but Jessica could see worry in his eyes. "Morning. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Jessica looked at the approaching storm clouds with concern. "Those clouds don't look very friendly. Do you think we should be worried?" "The captain announced at breakfast that we might encounter some rough weather this afternoon," Nathan admitted. "Nothing dangerous, but it could get pretty choppy." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Their relationship had begun during a storm, with Jessica literally falling into Nathan's arms during rough seas. Now another storm was approaching just as they faced the uncertainty of what came next. They spent the morning trying to maintain their usual easy companionship, but both could feel the weight of unspoken questions hanging between them. During lunch, their conversation felt stilted for the first time since that initial awkward meeting. They were both thinking about tomorrow, about returning to their separate worlds. But neither wanted to be the first to address the elephant in the room. By mid-afternoon, the weather had turned dramatically. What had started as scattered clouds had developed into a proper storm, with winds strong enough to make walking on deck challenging and waves large enough to send less experienced passengers hurrying. Back to their cabins, Jessica and Nathan had taken refuge in the ship's library, a quiet sanctuary with comfortable chairs and wide windows that offered a dramatic view of the churning ocean. Most other passengers had either gone to their cabins or gathered in the main entertainment areas were organized. Activities provided distraction from the weather. "It's beautiful in a terrifying way," Jessica observed, watching waves crash against the ship's lower decks. "Like a lot of worthwhile things in life," Nathan replied. But he wasn't looking at the storm. He was looking at her. The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither had been ready to acknowledge before now. Jessica felt her heart speed up as she met his gaze. Seeing an intensity there that had nothing to do with the weather outside, "Nathan," she began, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Before you say anything, I need to tell you something," he said, moving closer to her chair. "These past few days with you have been the happiest I've felt in years. Not just relaxed or content, but genuinely happy." I had forgotten what that felt like. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. "I feel the same way." "But Nathan, we live in different cities. We have completely different lives. I don't know how this could possibly work." "Neither do I," Nathan admitted, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. "All I know is that I don't want to go back to the way things were before I met you. I don't want to wake up every morning thinking only about work and fall asleep every night wondering why nothing feels meaningful anymore." The ship lurched suddenly as a particularly large wave hit, and Jessica instinctively reached out to steady herself. Nathan caught her hand, and instead of letting go when the ship stabilized, he held on. "Jessica, I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other for 5 days, but I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air like a confession and a question all at once. Jessica stared into Nathan's eyes, seeing vulnerability there that she knew had cost him tremendously to show. In her careful, planned life, 5 days wasn't enough time to know anything for certain. But her heart was telling her something different than her practical mind. It is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane. I don't fall in love with strangers on vacation. I don't make impulsive decisions about my future based on feelings instead of logical analysis. But, Nathan prompted gently, hope flickering in his expression. But I think I'm falling in love with you too, Jessica admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them, and it terrifies me more than any storm ever could. Nathan's face broke into a smile that was brighter than any sunshine. He stood and pulled Jessica up with him, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. So what do we do now? Jessica asked, her voice muffled against his chest. I have absolutely no idea, Nathan admitted with a laugh. I'm supposed to be the guy with the plan, remember? But all my usual strategies seem completely inadequate for this situation. They held each other as the storm raged outside, both drawing comfort from the solid presence of the other person, while their minds raced through possibilities and obstacles. Jessica's practical side was already calculating distances and time zones, considering career implications and logistics. But for once, her heart was shouting louder than her brain. I have a confession to make, Jessica said, pulling back to look at Nathan's face. I looked you up online yesterday. Nathan raised an eyebrow with amusement. And what did you discover about me that Google knows? That you're even more successful than you let on. That your company is worth about 50 times more than I initially thought. That you've been featured on magazine covers as one of the most eligible bachelors in tech. Jessica's voice grew quieter. It made me realize how different our worlds really are. Jessica, Nathan said firmly, cupping her face in his hands, I don't care if you never earn another dollar in your life. I don't care if you live in a studio apartment or a mansion. These past few days, you've shown me who I could be if I stopped being so afraid of actually living. That's worth more than any business success I've ever achieved. But what about the practical stuff? Jessica asked, even as she leaned into his touch. I live in Chicago. You live in San Francisco. I work for a mid-sized company. You run a global corporation. Your life is board meetings and international travel. Mine is middle management and hoping for a small promotion next year. Those are just details, Nathan said with growing conviction. Important details, yes, but still just logistics to be figured out. The real question is whether we want to try. Another large wave hit the ship, and the lights flickered momentarily. But instead of feeling afraid, Jessica found herself laughing at the cosmic timing of it all. We're having this conversation during a literal storm, she pointed out. It's like the universe is providing dramatic emphasis. Maybe the universe is trying to tell us that some things are worth weathering storms for, Nathan suggested, his arms tightening around her protectively as the ship swayed. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the library, talking through possibilities with the kind of focused intensity they usually reserved for work projects. Nathan suggested Jessica could relocate to San Francisco, offering to help her find a position at one of the many companies in his network. Jessica countered with the idea that Nathan could open a satellite office in Chicago, giving him a reason to spend significant time in the Midwest. Or, Nathan said as the storm began to subside toward evening, we could both move somewhere completely new. Start fresh together. The suggestion was so bold, so unlike either of their usual careful approaches to life decisions, that it took Jessica's breath away. You would really do that? Give up everything you've built in San Francisco? I've been thinking about it more seriously since I met you, Nathan admitted. My company is established enough now that I could run it from anywhere with good internet access. And honestly, I've been feeling trapped by my own success for years. Maybe it's time for a change that's about choosing happiness instead of just accumulating more achievements. As night fell and the storm moved on, leaving clear skies filled with brilliant stars, Jessica and Nathan found themselves on the now calm observation deck, holding hands and making plans that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. My lease is up for renewal next month, Jessica said, surprising herself with how icily the words came. I was dreading the decision because my rent is going up and my apartment doesn't even make me happy anymore. Maybe that was the universe preparing me for something better, and I've been putting off a major expansion decision for months because none of the options felt right, Nathan added. Maybe I was waiting for the right reason to make a big change. They talked until dawn, making lists of practical steps and contingency plans, but also sharing dreams they had put aside years earlier. Nathan talked about his desire to get back into hands-on development work, creating apps that solved real problems for real people instead of just generating revenue. Jessica shared her long-buried dream of starting her own marketing consultancy, focusing on small businesses and causes she actually cared about instead of maximizing profit margins for corporate clients. We could be business partners too, Nathan suggested as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Your marketing expertise and my technical background? We could build something together that's about more than just making money. You would trust me with something that important? Jessica asked, still amazed by how quickly her life was transforming. I would trust you with everything important, Nathan replied, and the sincerity in his voice made Jessica's eyes fill with tears. When they finally returned to their cabins to pack for disembarkation, both felt exhausted but exhilarated. They'd agreed to spend the next few weeks making concrete plans, handling the logistics of major life changes, and figuring out the details of building a future together, no matter what happens next. What? Nathan said as he walked Jessica to her cabin door one last time. These 6 days have changed everything for me. You've changed everything for me. For me too, Jessica replied, going up on her toes to kiss him softly. I'm terrified and excited and completely out of my comfort zone. But for the first time in years, I'm looking forward to tomorrow instead of just trying to get through it, as the Ocean Majesty sailed toward Miami in the end of their cruise. Jessica packed her belongings with hands that shook slightly from anticipation rather than anxiety. She was returning to shore as a completely different person than the one who had boarded 6 days earlier. Her phone, which had been ignored for most of the cruise, showed dozens of messages from work and friends. But instead of feeling overwhelmed by the demands waiting for her, Jessica felt empowered to make choices about which parts of her old life still served her, and which parts she was ready to leave behind. Woman who had grabbed onto a stranger during a storm was about to embark on the biggest adventure of her life. And this time, she wasn't facing the unknown alone.